The marble lobby of the Grand Plaza froze in silence the second Zoe Johnson picked up her phone. She wasn't supposed to. Every cleaner knew that was the golden rule. But when the call flashed University of Amsterdam, her heart pounded louder than the vacuum in her hands. "Zoe Johnson," she whispered, ducking behind a towering column. What happened next would flip her entire world upside down. A deep voice answered back, in flawless Dutch, without hesitation. Zoe replied in the same language, her accent sharp, fluid, undeniable. Guests stopped mid-stride. A billionaire had just entered the lobby, Richard Coleman, owner of the Hotel Empire, and he was staring at her as if he'd just seen a ghost. Beside him, manager Richards burned with rage. A cleaning lady, speaking like an international diplomat, in front of the most powerful man in the building? Unforgivable. "Johnson, my office, now!" Richards barked, her voice slicing through the silence. Long before the lobby scandal, Zoe Johnson had lived a life of sacrifice that nobody saw. By day, she scrubbed hotel bathrooms until her hands cracked from chemicals. By night, she buried herself in textbooks, dictionaries, and endless applications for scholarships that never came. She was 29, with a degree in linguistics from Georgetown, a name that should have opened doors. Instead, those doors slammed in her face again and again. 47 resumes sent to international companies, dozens of interviews where her accent was scrutinized more than her credentials, and 12 internal applications to transfer out of housekeeping, each one stamped with rejection by the same two names, Richards and Whitmore. Zoe carried her dreams in silence. In the tiny apartment she shared with two exhausted nurses, she taped her certificates to peeling walls, a fragile reminder that she was more than a uniform. At night, when her roommates slept, she translated novels just to keep her skills alive. She whispered Chinese proverbs under her breath, scribbled Dutch idioms on sticky notes, and practiced French phonetics until dawn. Every paycheck vanished into rent, food, and small savings toward a master's program that always seemed out of reach. Still, she endured. Because beneath the bleach-stained gloves and the endless mop strokes was a woman fighting to keep her identity intact, a linguist trapped in a cleaner's body. And when she answered that call in Dutch, 6 years of invisible struggle suddenly collided with destiny. Even before the Dutch phone call shook the marble lobby, Zoe had sensed that something inside the Grand Plaza was deeply wrong. She noticed it first in whispers during staff meetings. Richards praised certain receptionists for professionalism, even when they chatted on personal calls at the front desk. But when Zoe's phone rang once, punishment was instant and merciless. The double standard was too blatant to ignore. Then came the translation contracts. Whenever international conferences were held, Zoe sometimes caught a glimpse of the glossy materials printed for guests. She could spot errors instantly. Mandarin characters placed backward, Dutch idioms twisted into nonsense. Once, she quietly pointed it out to a supervisor. The reply was cold. "Not your concern. Stick to cleaning." Worse, Zoe began to notice the same names always tied to promotions, candidates with fewer skills, sometimes barely qualified, yet rising through the ranks like balloons filled with hot air. Meanwhile, resumes like hers gathered dust in HR files, never even reaching the desks of executives. She remembered one evening vividly, while cleaning the executive lounge. She overheard Whitmore laughing with Richards about a family discount. His niece had just signed another translation deal. $50,000 for work Zoe knew was riddled with mistakes. They spoke as if it was nothing, sipping whiskey while Zoe polished the floor beneath their shoes. The message was clear. This wasn't incompetence. It was protection. Nepotism disguised as business. Racism dressed up as policy. A system built to reward the insiders and bury everyone else. For 6 years, Zoe carried these suspicions like a silent weight. She wanted to scream, to expose it all. But without proof, she would be crushed in an instant. So, she swallowed her pride, kept her head down, and waited. And then destiny called, literally, in Dutch. That single moment gave her not just a chance to rise, but the weapon she needed to crack the polished surface of the Grand Plaza and reveal the rot festering underneath. The real shock came not when Zoe was punished, But when the billionaire himself pulled back the curtain, in the towering silence of his office, Richard Coleman flipped through Zoe's file, each page a dagger to the system she had endured. Georgetown University, honors in linguistics, 6 languages fluently, including Mandarin and Dutch, 6 international publications. His eyes narrowed. And yet, 6 years, cleaning bathrooms? Zoe stood frozen. No one had ever spoken her resume out loud inside these walls. Coleman leaned forward, his tone sharp but curious. Tell me, Ms. Johnson, why is someone with your credentials pushing a mop while my executives waste thousands on mistranslations? Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to answer. Because every attempt I made to move forward was blocked. 47 resumes to the international department ignored. 12 transfer requests denied, always by the same 2 signatures, Richards and Whitmore. Coleman scribbled down the names, his jaw tightening. Interesting. Mr. Whitmore has complained for months about the lack of multilingual staff. Meanwhile, he's sitting on one he refused to promote. For Zoe, the moment was electric. For years, she had been invisible, reduced to a uniform. Now, the most powerful man in the building was staring at her like a missing puzzle piece. Coleman closed the file with a snap. Ms. Johnson, tomorrow we host a trade conference with Dutch and Chinese executives. I need someone who speaks both languages, understands cultural nuances, and can prevent disasters before they happen. He paused, letting the words sink in. I want you. Zoe blinked. You want me to clean their rooms? A rare smile crossed his face. No, I want you to coordinate international relations. Salary, $5,000 a week, starting today. The room seemed to spin. For Zoe, it wasn't just the money. It was validation, proof that her years of struggle hadn't been madness. But for the hotel, this appointment would be more than shocking. It would be the spark that exposed a system of corruption no one had dared to confront. The conference hall glittered with chandeliers, the air thick with the weight of multi-million-dollar deals. Dutch executives mingled with Chinese business leaders, their conversations layered with formality and unspoken cultural codes. It was the perfect storm for miscommunication, and the perfect test for Zoe Johnson. In her new blazer, badge gleaming, Zoe moved through the room with a quiet authority. At first, some guests mistook her for staff assigned to refill glasses. But the moment she slipped effortlessly from Mandarin to Dutch, guiding 2 executives through a delicate negotiation, the perception shifted. Suddenly, all eyes turned to her. Her first challenge came fast. A Chinese executive frowned at a welcome packet, his tone sharp. This phrase, unacceptable, offensive. The room froze. Zoe stepped forward, scanning the document. With steady confidence, she explained. It's a mistranslation. It should say mutual prosperity, not burden of obligation. Then, in flawless Mandarin, she apologized on behalf of the hotel and offered the corrected version she had personally prepared. The tension dissolved into nods of respect. From the corner, Coleman watched silently. His suspicion confirmed. The hotel's official translators were frauds. During a coffee break, a Dutch businessman approached Zoe. Excuse me, aren't you the author of the article on linguistic variation in international business? She blinked in surprise, then nodded. I cited your work twice. Brilliant analysis. He introduced her to colleagues, and within minutes, Zoe was surrounded by executives quoting her research as if she were a keynote speaker, not a last-minute hire. Meanwhile, Whitmore's smile faltered. Every success Zoe scored was a blade at his credibility. He had buried her for 6 years, and now, in less than a day, she was proving more valuable than his entire department. The turning point was clear. Zoe wasn't just surviving the conference. She was commanding it. The cracks in the system widened with every hour of the conference. Zoe had already saved the hotel from a cultural disaster, but her instincts told her the mistranslations weren't isolated mistakes. They were evidence of something rotten. Late one evening, while preparing materials for the next day, Zoe stumbled across a folder left open on the printer. The name on the cover froze her in place. Whitmore Language Services. Inside were invoices, dozens of them, each one billed at outrageous prices. 50,000 here, 75,000 there. For translations Zoe knew were sloppy, sometimes laughably wrong. Her pulse raced. The company wasn't some global firm, it was a family front. Whitmore's niece was behind every contract. No certifications, no experience. Just blood ties and inflated payments. Zoe copied the files discreetly, her hands trembling. Later, in HR, she found an ally, Zoe Williams, the young analyst. "I've suspected this for months," Williams whispered, sliding over additional hiring records. They revealed a clear pattern. Qualified non-white candidates, especially women, systematically rejected. Unqualified insiders fast-tracked. The evidence was undeniable. The next morning, the tension escalated. Zoe spotted Whitmore escorting his niece into the executive elevators, clutching a folder labeled Final Translation, Master Contract. She caught a glimpse. The same critical errors, ready to sabotage negotiations worth millions. Zoe rushed to Coleman's office. Bursting in, she laid the documents on his desk. "He's replacing my corrections with her flawed work, and I have proof this has been happening for years." Coleman flipped through the evidence, his face hardening. "Are you absolutely certain?" "I confirmed with Peking University," Zoe said, sliding over an email. "Her Mandarin certification is fake. They never issued it." Before Coleman could respond, Whitmore barged in, fake confidence plastered across his face. "Richard, the Dutch executives are waiting for signatures, but there are inconsistencies in Johnson's work." Coleman cut him off, voice cold as steel. "Enough. I've seen the payment records, the false credentials, the systematic rejection of qualified staff. This ends now." For the first time, Whitmore's mask slipped. Rage twisted his face. He spat at Zoe. "You're nobody. A cleaning lady who thinks she can play with the big boys." Zoe didn't flinch. "Correction. A linguist with a PhD in applied linguistics, 6 publications, and 6 languages. The only thing I couldn't master was the corruption you built here." Coleman's decision was swift. "Emergency board meeting, 30 minutes. I expect your resignation letter on my desk." The walls of the Grand Plaza were about to echo with truths that could topple careers and reputations forever. 30 minutes later, the executive auditorium was filled to the brim. Department heads, supervisors, and senior managers rushed in, their whispers colliding under the chandelier lights. In the front row, Dutch and Chinese executives sat quietly, curious about the sudden summons. Everyone knew something seismic was about to erupt. When Richard Coleman entered, silence dropped like a curtain. He walked to the podium with measured steps, Zoe Johnson by his side, her presence in a blazer, not a uniform, already sparked waves of confusion across the room. Coleman's voice was steady but heavy. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we confront a truth that should shame us all. For years, this company has suffered not because of competition, but because of corruption and discrimination within our own walls." Gasps echoed. Eyes darted toward Whitmore, who sat stiffly, his niece trembling beside him. Coleman continued, holding up documents Zoe had uncovered. $50,000 payments for translations riddled with errors, false certifications, nepotism masquerading as policy. Meanwhile, qualified employees, talented, multilingual, dedicated, were forced into janitorial roles. He paused, then added with weight, "Employees like Ms. Johnson." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Managers who had dismissed Zoe for years now avoided her gaze. Coleman's tone sharpened. "Effective immediately. Thomas Whitmore is terminated for cause. Sarah Richards is suspended pending further investigation. And this board will authorize a full audit of hiring and promotion practices over the last 5 years." The announcement landed like a thunderclap. Whitmore shot to his feet, red with fury. "You can't do this. My contracts—" Coleman's stare cut him down. "Your contracts are fraud. Your niece's credentials are fake. You've cost this company millions and buried talent that could have transformed us." All eyes turned to Zoe. Calmly, she placed a small recorder on the table. And every word he's whispered to me, every insult, every threat, I recorded. If anyone doubts this system existed, here is your proof. Gasps turned into stunned silence. A few even applauded quietly. For Zoe, the moment was surreal. 6 years of invisibility collapsed in a single hour. She wasn't the cleaning lady anymore. She was the witness, the truth teller, the catalyst for change. Coleman's final words rang like a verdict. This is not just about one hotel. It is about an industry that buries brilliance under uniforms. Today, that ends. The boardroom, once a fortress of silence, now trembled with the weight of revolution. The board meeting ended, but the ripples had only begun. By nightfall, the news had spread through every hallway of the Grand Plaza. Managers whispered in corners. Employees traded glances of shock, some with relief, others with fear. For years, Whitmore had been untouchable. Now he was nothing but a headline waiting to be written. Within 24 hours, the board's official statement was released. Whitmore terminated for cause. Richard suspended pending investigation, and a full audit underway. Reporters swarmed the hotel entrance, their cameras hungry for a glimpse of the fallen executive. Whitmore tried to fight back. He stormed into Coleman's office demanding arbitration, shouting that he was being framed. But Coleman didn't even flinch. He simply slid the evidence folder across the desk. Falsified certifications, nepotistic contracts, fraudulent invoices. You buried brilliance under bleach, Coleman said coldly. Now you'll drown in your own lies. When the audit results came in, the destruction was undeniable. Hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned into bogus translation services. Dozens of internal complaints suppressed. A pattern of systematic discrimination that had quietly bled talent out of the company for years. Whitmore's reputation collapsed overnight. Industry journals branded him a disgrace. Invitations to elite conferences vanished. Within months, he was spotted working as a night manager at a roadside motel in Arizona. His niece forced into a professional ethics program after returning every inflated payment. The empire he had built on lies was dust. For Richards, the consequences were quieter but just as brutal. Demoted to a small hotel in California, her career permanently stained. She watched Zoe's rise from a distance, bitterness eating her alive. Meanwhile, Zoe's name began to spread far beyond the Grand Plaza. Executives from other chains called Coleman, impressed not only by her linguistic skill but by her integrity under fire. She had exposed corruption not for ambition, but for justice. For Zoe, it was surreal. The same halls where she had once pushed a mop now echoed with respect. Guests who never noticed her now asked for her by name, and colleagues who once sneered fell silent when she passed. The downfall of Whitmore was more than one man's ruin. It was proof that truth, when armed with courage, could topple even the most immovable structures, and Zoe Johnson had become the living embodiment of that truth. 6 months after the scandal, the Grand Plaza was no longer the same hotel. What once reeked of silence and favoritism now buzzed with possibility. And at the heart of that transformation stood Zoe Johnson. Coleman had given her not just a title but a mission to dismantle the invisible walls that had buried talent under uniforms. Zoe poured her soul into creating the Invisible Talents Program, a groundbreaking initiative designed to find and promote employees who had been overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. The program was simple but revolutionary. Every employee, from janitors to kitchen staff, was encouraged to submit their resumes, skills, and ambitions. An independent panel reviewed each case, ensuring no bias, no favoritism, no hidden agendas. For the first time, housekeepers could be recognized as polyglots, bellboys as computer engineers, and dishwashers as future managers. The results were staggering. Outsourced translation costs dropped by 78% as hidden multilingual employees took the lead. Customer satisfaction with international guests rose 42% in a single quarter. Diversity ratings soared, pushing the Grand Plaza chain to the top of industry rankings. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real legacy was human. Zoe saw a security guard become an IT specialist, a cook join the finance team, and the daughter of a cleaner win the very first scholarship funded by the Coleman Foundation for Inclusive Education. Tears often flowed in those meetings, not of sorrow, but of long-delayed recognition. At the program's first annual presentation, Zoe stood before regional managers and executives. Her voice trembled with both pride and memory. For decades, people like me were invisible, seen only through a uniform. Today, we prove that brilliance knows no color, no accent, no position on the payroll. True power lies not in the profits we make, but in the potential we unleash. Executives rose to their feet, applauding. Some wiped tears discreetly. Even Coleman, a man known for his stone face, clapped until his palms reddened. Zoe had not just exposed corruption, she had rewritten the rules. The Invisible Talents program became a model copied across the hospitality industry, forcing companies nationwide to confront the prejudices they had buried for decades. Her journey had begun with a forbidden phone call in Dutch, but her legacy was something far greater, ensuring that no voice, no talent, and no dream would ever be silenced again. On the day of the final presentation, Zoe stood before a room filled with executives, employees, and partners watching through live broadcast across the hotel chain. She took a deep breath, remembering the girl who once scrubbed bathrooms with her dreams locked inside a uniform. Her voice was calm but resolute. Greatness is not measured by the barriers you break alone, but by the doors you leave open for those who come after. For too long, extraordinary talent has been buried under silence, prejudice, and uniforms. Today, we prove that when given a chance, invisible people can reshape an entire industry. The room erupted in applause, but Zoe's eyes glistened with tears. She thought of her mother's sacrifices, of every night she spent whispering languages into the dark, and of the injustice that almost crushed her spirit. Now, her story wasn't just survival, it was transformation. The legacy of one forbidden phone call in Dutch had grown into a movement, and Zoe's message was clear. The true power of a company, of a society, lies not in what it earns, but in the human potential it unleashes.